I also understand that the girls' basketball team, who I had the privilege of seeing play for the first time this year last week, have a game like the boys do. They're at Clinton later on this week, and understand that Clinton has some incredible talent on their team. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about that and preview that game?
I've had a good relationship with their coach, Chris Owens, since I've taken this job, and we've become pretty good friends. So we tried to start scheduling these home and aways, and this is the first year that we're going to be playing when he's at full strength. And by full strength, that means when we're going to go up there on Thursday, we're going to have to contend with Michaela Boykin, who committed to Duke University in 8th grade. And like I have told many people, I think she could start for many varsity boys teams, and that's not hyperbole. They also have another player in Alex Kennedy that's a tremendous player. But they'll be our first 2A opponent, and they're going to be in the East. So if we want to go to the state title, we're going to have to get through them anyway. So Chris and I both knew scheduling each other was going to help both of us. So we've tried to load up our schedule early on, and they are no different.
Coach, we talked a little bit before the show tonight about the pilot year for the playoff formats this year, how the conference champion is the only one this year that is guaranteed to go to the playoffs. And from my perspective, I will tell you how I honestly feel about it. And I'm a little biased towards it, I guess, but I really don't like the change that was made. I guess we'll know more after the season. We see how it all unfolds. But really, that kind of hinders being able to schedule against different opponents, because as a powerhouse that I believe Northside is, it might give you some trouble in the future being able to schedule some opponents that maybe you normally would get to play if it was top 3 make it.
I have no qualms in voicing my displeasure in the new format. I think that the fact of the matter is that we go out and schedule teams to make ourselves better to get ready for the playoffs. And if that puts us in a position where we might not be able to become conference champions, and that further affects our seeding just because of our strength of schedule, I don't see the sense in that. So we have some teams that don't want to play us because maybe they are a younger or less talented team. So we don't have the luxury of scheduling some of those teams right now because being at this moment, you never know about the future, but at this moment we're a pretty strong program. So what we do is we try to up the ante with who we play. And we might take one on the chin once in a while. We did in our opening game, and you never know what's going to happen in these next couple games. We got a couple more. Clinton's one of the best in 2A. Jacksonville's probably the best in 3A. We're probably going to see New Hanover again in the Christmas tournament, who's obviously a 4A school. We do this to get ready, but for what it affects our win-loss records, that will affect our seeding, which I know at the end of the day you have to win no matter what, but the travel comes into play, in the earlier rounds. So I certainly didn't vote for it, but I don't even remember anybody letting me cast one. So
that's I love your input on it, and I'm glad that you're able to share your thoughts on it. And I have the relatively same thoughts that you do on the system. Now, speaking of the playoff system, this is the last year that the Northside Lady Monarchs and all of Northside High School will be considered in the 2A. Next year they'll be moving up to 3A, and you'll have some different opponents next year that are in your conference. And Jacksonville will be one of them. Havelock, I believe, will be in the conference next year. Swansboro and West Carteret. So it's a pretty strong conference, if you will. What are some things that you're doing this year to help get you ready for that next year?
Well, most of those teams we normally play anyway. We've had Jacksonville twice this year, White Oak twice this year. We had Havelock twice this year, and we wanted them, this past year, but we wanted them again this year, but their boys team didn't necessarily want to do it because of the anticipation of their football and how far they went with the playoffs. So schedule-wise, it didn't work out. Familiarity with West Carteret, not so much, but when we go to scout teams like Croatan and whatnot, they play those teams, so we'll see them. So I think it's going to be a great conference. It's going to be great for all sports, but for girls basketball, it's going to be just as challenging. I mean, we're going to lose in North Brunswick, who right now is 3-0 and brought back their entire roster from last year. We're going to lose in East Duplin, who's good every year. So we're gaining some good teams, but we're losing some good teams too.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. You're going to lose some teams from 2A, and you're going to gain some positive and some even better teams probably from 3A. So the competition will definitely rise for Northside here in the show. Now, Coach, you have a game coming up tomorrow. That's at White Oak. Mm-hmm. And then you have the big game at Clinton on Thursday, the 1st. And then on Monday, I finally got it right now that we're on the air. I'm not going to lie. I've said it Tuesday all week long. The game is Monday that we will be playing Jacksonville as Jacksonville comes. They come to our house on Monday to play us. We played them a little bit earlier in the year, and that's the only loss so far for the Lady Monarchs, but I know they can't wait for that Jacksonville game on Monday. The Lady Monarchs 3-1 right now, having a pretty good year. They haven't really had any competition since the first week, though. I think the New Hanover was probably the best of the competition so far. If you ask me all-around basketball teams of anybody they played this year, I think New Hanover was the best competition so far. And you've got some tough games coming up. What are some of the things you're doing with the Lady Monarchs or talking to them as you prepare for this tough stretch of games coming up?
Well, the one thing, and I have to tip my hat to my assistant coaches because they've helped me tremendously, is teaching these girls to be mentally tougher. Things aren't always going to go your way. There's going to be times when the call's not going to go your way. There's going to be a time where you play a team that's more athletic than you, and you have to use a little more heart than you do execution even. I think a lot of the times, sometimes we got by on athleticism alone. But when we got later in the rounds in the playoffs, especially it comes to mind in Fayetteville when we lost to North Pitt, our mentality kind of started falling, which that falls on me because I mean they've got to be a reflection of me, and but we fell apart of that game in the regionals a couple years ago. And one thing we've been preaching over and over is not to let that happen again. So when we do play these tougher teams and things aren't going our way, for example, our opener at Jacksonville, things were not going our way. Some self-inflicted, some not. But how we react to it and how we handle it, we need to be able to do a better job. I think that's what's really going to count when it comes deeper in the playoffs. We have a couple new assistants, in Kayla Hill, who played for me my first year, and then Lexi Red, who was a star a few years before I got here. And they're young enough, and they have played at Northside, so they're able to talk to these girls, and they wore the uniform, and they were a hard-nosed group. And that's what they're really trying to. No, I'm not saying they're by no means are they soft, but to be, if you want to wear a ring, mentality wise, you got to be tough as nails, and that's where we're trying to get them. And to credit to the girls, they haven't backed down a bit, and we've had some tough practices, and they're working on it. So I tip my hat to them for sticking it out.
As in most high school sports, you have girls every year that will graduate and will go on to other things. Talk about how tough it's been replacing Courtney Mitchell, if you will, so far.
Well, Courtney Mitchell, you could get on her as much as you wanted, and you were going to get nothing but a yes sir, and then whatever the issue was going to get fixed. Even if she was going to screw up, she was going to do it at 100 miles per hour, and her tenacity with defense was something that is just it's really just hard to replace. And but that's how it goes. Coaching in public schools, people graduate. Some people have up years, some people have down years. We so happen to only lose a couple, and really one main one in Courtney. Christine Council has come in though this year and done a good job defensively trying to fill that role, and we think as the year goes on, she'll do that. To me, Grant's already been doing that in the paint, and then we know what Kayla Stevens can bring to the table.
Kayla Stevens, her leadership, as we've been able to witness now for our second straight year of doing Lady Monarchs basketball, her leadership is second to none. Doesn't matter who the opponent was. We've never seen a student athlete in any of the sports take leadership like Kayla does, and you can see it and you can hear it throughout the auditorium throughout the gym, if you will, the basketball court, that she's always directing when she's on the court. And you have some newer players that are stepping up this year and trying to fill some of the spots and moving some things around a little bit. It makes her job as the leader on the court, if you will, even tougher. And how has she adapted to that? How is she taking it?
Well, she's growing into the same role that we're trying to get everybody into when it comes to mentality-wise. We moved her back to point guard. We were going to run her off the 2 this year. We went ahead and decided to move her back to point guard. We thought, that would be better for our team. That's what she's going to be playing in college. So now, not only does she have the responsibility of, everybody looks to her for scoring, but she has to make sure, and just like every other point guard, you need to know where everybody's supposed to be at all times. And with a bunch of with new faces, she's got to be the director in that. I'm not out on the floor. I can't go take the girl by the wrist, and walk her to where she's supposed to be. So Kayla takes over that, and she's starting to do a good job because we have a younger core. We have a really good JV team led by really good JV coaches that I think, right now idolize her as a player, but I want to fill her role as a star someday. And just to see her work ethic is really what we got to do. Her signing a couple weeks ago when she officially signed for High Point, and the only thing that I could reiterate over and over was just her pure relentless work ethic. And you can't convince me that anybody works harder than she does at her craft. She gave up a lot of her youth. A lot of teenagers like to do other things. She spent weekends, weeknights before school working on her craft. So, she plays with a little bit of chip on her shoulder, and she deserves it because she's worked for it. So she expects that of a lot of her teammates, and I think rightfully so. And the teammates, I think, are doing a good job now. Even if it took them a while to adapt to it, they realize that it's all for the betterment of the team. The ultimate goal is to win, and she knows how to win.
Coach, and we're honored. We'll be bringing the Northside and Jacksonville women's basketball game coming up this Monday. You can listen to it on WABQ Radio.